So, timestamps exist. Pause if you want to look at anything on screen, or skip forward if you need to, because I will be going through two sections of code. So the first one is going to be more base World of Horror content, custom content explanation. So, I mentioned that I was going to explain. I'm going to explain now. In a previous, I explained in the previous episode. I'm going to explain further now. So, menu tag is what appears on the top right of your character on the character selection screen. For the most part, again, to make this all as explicit as possible for future reference or past reference. In English, the name of the occupation, so police officer, student, college student, maybe they're a janitor, who knows, right? But English name here if you are playing or making a character in English, and then below it should usually always be the Japanese name. If you're making a character in Japanese, then you just need the occupation name in Japanese, and you just delete the hashtag here. To define it really quickly, this hashtag is the ito file code for a line break. Let me repeat that again. So if you use a hashtag, you get a line break. I forgot if it's / or / or some other symbol to actually put a pound symbol, as you see here, but you get what I mean. And if you want to search for it yourself, I will explain in a future episode, because again, not just pound symbols, but other symbols that are already defined in Ito code can be made as that typed as that symbol in text. However, you do need, again, specific syntax. I forgot which / it is, so I'll explain later on. But otherwise, just know that pound symbols are a line break. So as we move into menu description, yes, the name of the character in the first line, then 2 line breaks, and then the description or the lore of or the immersion of the character. Here I put enough space for an English haiku-ish description. If you want to, you can add pound symbols. I like adding pound symbols myself to add my own line breaks. Otherwise, just know that usually you have about a 40 to 50 character limit, symbol limit, before things on the bottom get pushed past the character description screen, which makes it look basically ugly. I'll say ugly, but you get the point. Play around with it. You can always just queue out at character select screen and then load it in after you save. So for example, I want to change this to rabbit. If I were in game and on the character select screen, I hit Q, and the moment the game loads, it'll load up this new description. However, I'm going to leave it like this just to show you what this looks like when we get to the character select screen. After that is another line break, line break with 3 dashes, specifically 3 dashes if you want to be consistent with World of Horror. If you don't want to and you just want to save more space, you don't have to. And then if you want to stay consistent, after another pound symbol for another line break, you add in negative space stat, so the stat that they have less of, and then plus stat. This can change based on, if you want to increase stats further or lower. So if you have, a character that has less than 6, so 6 is the 6 is the relative value that you're using to describe, hey, this stat is negative and the stat is positive. So if they have 5 dexterity and 4 charisma, actually, no, that's not true. Redefine that. No cuts here. If their stat is the lowest, then you want to leave the negative stat or minus stat should be the lowest stat. So if dexterity is at 3 and charisma is at 4, then dexterity should be the one listed here. However, if you have 2 stats that are, again, tied for the lowest, then you add 2 stats. But again, use whatever fits in your mind. I'm not going to be too odd, and you shouldn't be looking for my approval either. And then the opposite for plus stats. So if they have like 9 strength, 8 charisma, 7 perception, then you put strength here, unless you want to notify that those stats are all the highest. Again, do whatever you want, because once the player gets in game, they'll be able to understand just by looking at the number. And then another pound symbol and other bonuses. So other bonuses can include the character mechanic. So for example, Yashiro has Faith, Toshiaki has Necronomicon. You can take from what you did earlier and say just, plus empty bottle, something like this. Just to show that, just to immediately tell the player what they get at the very beginning. If you're making a perm character, this might be a bit more in-depth, basically. But you have a separate option to let the player know what mechanics are once they get in game. So don't try too hard to put a description here, because you can put in, you can do more later. The description here, the menu description, is more for simple things. And then, as I mentioned earlier, prick packs A and B, there is a list that exists. I will show you the list later, because again, this is more time than I would take. For the most part, I wanted to get through tag and description. Statuses we'll skip for the moment, but I added it here just to kind of show the structure of the file, and to show that you should probably, again, at least get the character working tag, description, what perks packs the character uses, and then move on to art afterward. However, if there's something important as we reach the bottom portion, and after the starting bonus, where with extended modding character, then you should add these first. Again, bonus types and perks I went over in the last episode, but I want to introduce sound selection and faith, and also to include the semicolon in the Ito, how that's used in Ito file. For those who don't know, basically adding a semicolon in one line of code, even if the line wraps around like this, it will not have the Ito file do that line of code. So there's not going to be any faith system to nurse Miku, but however, this sound selection will function as intended. I essentially use kind of the default name, however you do need to link to the characters folder correctly. So in my character Miku nurse folder, which you have seen in the last 2 previous episodes, I've added a hello.ogg. I don't know if it must be OGG, but that's, if you want to be consistent, if nothing else, that's the format that World of Horror uses, or at least recognizes immediately off of custom content. Again, this is for perm specifically, so for perm custom content, you want to use OGG. But otherwise, as I didn't actually give myself space to do 2 timestamps there. We'll get into the run, but I'll stop to show you what the character selection screen looks like, and we will move on. If I added in, I think I added the a second perk pack, right? Yeah, I did. I added the cereal milk killer perk pack. I did not randomize the run, so we're gonna hit that first, but otherwise, let's get into it. I know I've said I'm gonna take away the overrides, I keep forgetting. But Goizel 7th Curse, by the way. And off we go. Again, this stream is more this series is more stream of consciousness, so I would have likely cut out a few comments I made earlier, and yeah, as you can hear, that's the hello OGG. That is literally my voice going, "Ho!" in the background. I made it in Audacity. Audacity, for those who are free to play in content creation, is a free audio manipulation, creation, so on and so forth program, software, whatever you want to call it. Anywho. And as you see at the right side, I'll explain here now for the sake of timestamps, if nothing else. So this is what I put in the code. It's literally what I was describing, but this is what it would look like if you used what I used. So the occupation, the Japanese occupation name, it should be in Japanese, but I put it in English if you're making an English character. Same if you're doing, you know, Russian, Polish, Chinese. The only exception is Japanese, in which you would just have the occupation, and that would put it in one single line, because I think in the Japanese format of the game, when you swap the languages in the options menu, it will make this one line. So if you try to use 2 lines, it looks a bit odd. So then you have the character name. Here's the line break. There are 2 line breaks. That way you have this blank space to make it look nicer. And then this is the description. Again, this is already more than enough. If you look at the base characters, you note that they only have like 1 or 2 lines as well. Unless I, you know, made them look like that. But here's Yashiro. I think he has one of the longest descriptions. Usually, the more base characters, again, have like 2 or 3 lines. For Yashiro and Toshiaki, they have a lot more. But because the reason why the base characters can fit so many descriptions, is because they don't have the chosen perk packs, which basically takes 3 to 4 lines, and this will always be forced on the character. So again, if you make your description too long, this is going to be forced into the character, and it's going to show up and overflow. If you don't care about that, do what you want. If you do care about that, I'm describing it to you right now. Because again, if you want to add more gameplay related things so the player knows, here's the minus stat, plus stat. You'll note that for base characters, the stats are they're split into 2 lines. You can do that as well, but again, that's for up to you, the custom character maker creator, to figure out. And then other bonuses as well. So for example, Toshiaki shows that starts with bronze crucifix plus time worn katana. Ayaka shows that she starts with the onyx medallion. Doesn't show what the onyx medallion does, which is 2 curses per. And then I added the override, which is the time worn katana, but that's more perm related stuff. And then the chosen perk packs with the line breaks with 3 dashes in between. And then that's the end of the character. If there's anything else, again, it's up to you. I think the chosen perk packs portion, that's kind of taking a lot of the character selection text, is something that you want to decide whether or not you care about or not. Because if you only give them 1, I think there's still a blank space, if I recall correctly. Again, I don't remember everything at the moment. But anyway, let's set up this run and get into it. I just want to make sure I did something. Okay. And then we will pick Goizo. So, for the sake of timestamps, As we get into Goizo's seventh curse nurse, Miku, yeah, not really much else to say. This is just the gameplay portion, just to have fun. But if you were here mainly for the code and or what it looks like in character select, the text looks like in the character selection menu, then you know what, you've seen everything. Second charisma, Takushi-san, light, and strength check. Specifically, second mystery check and then second encounter check. But we have every single non-stat check because I also need a light source at some point. Well, I don't need it, but it would be nice. Anywho, let's move on here. Again, I'll get into more gameplay stuff, gameplay perm coding, probably in about 3 or 4 episodes. Just want to make sure we get the base character, custom character creation process out of the way. I think I saw as we get painting, bulletin, metamorphosis, shuttle, and hobo. I saw a question about something, and a lot, I think more than half and half of the questions for custom content in World of War end up being something along the lines of wanting to make something that base custom content can't do, but perm can definitely do, basically. And really, I think a huge part of it is the addition of variables. Now that's a very simple explanation. That doesn't explain everything. We're gonna open up funds here, by the way. Even though we have 5 funds, I'm gonna open them up. But yeah, we'll think about it. So I'm gonna probably forget about cleansing ritual, but it's fine. What are we doing here? I think we just go do meat cleaver and move on. I was talking about perm stuff. I forgot what specifically what I was talking about now. But anywho, I'm gonna do some cigarette play here. But otherwise, yeah, when I get to perm related, basically changes, I will the gameplay portion of the videos in this series will be more important because, well, you will see the gameplay effects of perm content. That I decided to create for this series. Oh, that's what I was talking about. So what I was talking about was questions in the community, whether Discord, Reddit, or otherwise, about what you can do. And I think the base general way to say it, whether you're experienced in World of War or not, I do believe that for the most part, actually, is that true? No, I'm going to say something else then. People might say, oh, that's a lot of work to put certain custom content because you have to go through perm to do so. Even though perm on its own, I think it's a very good simplified version of what you can do. It's not like, sorry, let me rephrase that. There are not a lot of steps you have to take to get started with perm. It's a very simple process to get perm started, but it is a lot of steps for someone who doesn't know anything about making mods for games in general. It's still a lot, even though I do believe perm in general is one of the more simple ways to make a lot of custom content. I say this from experience when oh my goodness, hold on, let me focus for a moment. Yeah, I say that, okay, never mind. I say this, I have a syringe and I bought the meat cleaver. I'm going crazy. Anyway, if you hit both the text, actually I do need to focus here for a moment because I need to make sure that I can do a thing. I think I'm just going to end up throwing the meat cleaver after Desperate Prep Strong. Yeah. So, yeah, I do think World of Horror is one of the simpler, and I don't mean that in a negative, I actually mean that in a positive way, or easier. I guess easier is a closer phrase, term, vocabulary. You get what I'm trying to say. Well, it's Tiny Cats, it's fine. Yeah, it's one of the easier games to mod if you want even more content. Not that you can't do a lot with the base custom content, but I mean, there's no perm is not going to hurt you. Basically, perm does a very good job of keeping vanilla custom content vanilla. Shrug. That's the end of the sentence. I mean that. And again, I say this from that's what I was saying. From experience, I have gotten into making content or making mods for other games. If you've already seen, in fact, on this channel, I've showed you one game. I'm not going to mention which one it is. You can find it for yourself because that's outside the topic of what I want to talk about this video. But as we get through bulletin ending A here, there are other games with just as simple processes, but because they have an extra 2 or 3 steps, it is complicated for, players who want to play more with the game, whether it's World of War, whether it is any other game, literally, then yeah, it's a process to go through. Now, again, you could argue that the use of mods and trying to be more, not creative, I'm losing the phrase at the moment, but you get what I'm trying to mean, to make their experience more interesting, for lack of a better word. I think that's the closer word, actually. To make their experience more interesting, adding mods or adding a pack of mods or adding something that allows the game to be changed to make it more entertaining and interesting is a process that most people or a lot of players, I won't say most, not even a majority, I would say that a lot of players have trouble going through, just in general. Now, if you're a fan of the game, then yes, are you more likely, and you're a lot more likely, and you're a lot more, well, yeah, just more likely to get something running. In this case, it would be Perm for World of Horror. In fact, I'm trying to remember what the exact thingy was. Also, I'm trying to focus on not taking it here. I think we're just going to throw the Eldritch Fluid after this turn. Yeah, we're just going to play it safe here. But basically, it's a process, and it's something that I believe in for myself. When I mentioned earlier that adding as little steps as possible, I think 2 steps is usually more than most people will go through, even though that sounds very small. There is a big asterisk in both of those steps, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Are we okay here with the Sever on Syringe? No, right? We can heal. Yeah, we can heal. Yeah, you know what? Let's just do that. Yeah, so you want to make it, I mean, if it's a 1-step process, cool. That is why from what I observe, and then therefore my opinion, I do believe a lot of things that are basically one-click shows, or hey, you download this and install it, are much more popular. Now, probably just more popular. And for good reason. Again, if you have to put someone through the process of even dragging a folder to the correct spot, a folder full of stuff, let's just say, then yeah, that tends to... players can get lost. Not a lot, I wouldn't say a majority do, but enough get lost where it's like, basically a player says, is it worth doing this every single time, basically? Now, is that a lot to ask for from someone making mods? Yeah. Yeah, just straight up. As someone who's also made mods himself, yes. You would be surprised how even a little... a quote-unquote little, because that is from other free people I've seen, and myself, little bug fixes here and there for mods, like, hey, something does not work correctly, how much time that can take off of the development of anything, really. So, yeah, let's take Metamorphosis now. We have Weird Substance, but I think we need a little bit more. I guess we'll see. If we run into out of funds, we'll trade off stamina and then grab another pack of cigarettes, so that's the plan. But yes, to step out of the forest and look at it instead of the trees for a moment. Basically, yes, if you can have something done in as little steps as possible, or you can even say 0, because sometimes there are basically loaders for certain things. We need a rest, by the way. Then yeah, do that. However, at that point, you kind of get into a bit of a security issue. So having a player rely on something. Also, it's been a while since I fought corruption, but... are we gonna be okay here? Yeah, it's Doom, right? So we should be relatively okay. It's a tanky circle encounter, but it's fine. But yeah, as for as little steps as possible, I think that's for the best. 0 steps is, if you really know what you're doing and people trust you enough to make content. But otherwise, we're gonna go for a dodge here. Otherwise, yes, 1-step processes I think are for the best. Basically, drag and drop, because even then, players can get lost. It won't. If nothing else. There's not a lot to there isn't a lot required to fix that usually. Now, sometimes there's a bit more, because sometimes players have their folders and directories sorted in a certain way, where even if they go to the right place, maybe something looks off because, I don't know, a switch was flipped somewhere, or the game was updated. Something like what I'm talking about here is... can lead to another few steps. That's why I'm saying that if you have something available in as little steps as possible, whether it's DLC or a game update, you don't want too many steps, because each step in itself can result in a multi-step process in fixing. So I'll give you an example, actually, as we kind of try and autopilot. We have 2 weird substances, so we should be able to get through this, but I'm still going to smoke the cigarettes. Also, we have a bunch of Doom. Why do we have a bunch of Doom? Oh, Goizo. I did Goizo rests, but even then, I would have had, like, what, 65% Doom? That's a lot. Anywho, yeah, actually, I'm just going to take this in the face for the moment, and then brace. But yes, that's why I say to make things as little steps as possible. That's why I also am part of why I'm making this series in kind of bite-sized format, to introduce you slowly into things. Also because, yes, as I mentioned in the previous episode, just making sure I can fit my attacks here. yes, I don't have enough time to make a full big 2-hour special on, hey, do this, because there's a lot. There's still a lot, especially if you want to make something very sophisticated for World of Horror, basically. But if you just want to make one character that it's not too complicated, basically like a base character, or one of the first 3-4 base characters, without too much, even though I would argue Aiko and Haru, to an extent, have their things. Like, Aiko has a passive action speed bonus, and Haru has the nicotine debuff, or basically adding a debuff to Haru at the very beginning that changes. Yes, it still is a process to go through, but that's why I say start small, start in as little steps as possible, and then work afterward. That's something that I believe is true in programming as well, and something that's also we can't take Doom here, by the way. Yeah, something that's also true in, you know, making custom content for World of War or making mods for a game. And if you don't believe me, I mean, or if you're confident enough, maybe you can make it work, but from what my observations and my experience and research, oftentimes, more often, like I would say like 75-80% of the time at minimum, people want to start small. If you start big, what ends up happening is you can get burnt out, you can get lost and make a lot of more mistakes than you really shouldn't have, really shouldn't have, so on and so forth. Again, there's a lot of stream of consciousness, so I might have made a mistake here and there, kind of explaining what I want to explain, or even just making mistakes in general, but I think I've gotten, for the most part, a lot of my points across as we're going through and trying to survive with one stamina rating. We have to run from this if we can. Okay, thank goodness. 91% Doom, but we're going for a high score here. Again, when I say going for a high score, I mean we're likely, if not almost certainly, going to die. However, we're just going to see how far we can go. That came from something World of Horror too, but something that I've been through, not just in life, but at least it's more apparent in World of Horror, where, you know, if you're gonna lose anyway, you might as well see how far you can go. If for no other reason, then maybe you get to a certain part where I think the best, one of the better examples, if not one of the best examples, is that you run into a situation that you could have just experienced even on a losing run, but you experience it later on in a run, and if you had known what you do on the losing run, then you would have been able to get past worst part afterward. That's usually more the reason why I think 98% of the time I just end up playing something through to the end anyway, even if I believe it's hopeless, because again, you might learn something from it, you might not, so that's the other 2%. For the most part, there are situations in which you're just wasting your time, but I think I think a lot of it came from my fighting game experience. When I was younger, that yeah, you just play something out because maybe you learn something that you may be able to lose later. In fact, that's a very specific example that's helped me out in competitive video gaming. But without further ado, I mean, since this run's ended, I've shown you the hello.ogg. I think that's one of the bigger takeaways. Otherwise, the only other bigger takeaways are the character description explanations I put at the very beginning of the video. So yeah, without further ado, not really much else to say. See you later!